Hello, and welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. Your support means everything to us. We'd love to know, which geographical location are you joining from today? At home? On the go? Share with us below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Funeral. The rain pattered against the stained glass windows of St. Matthew's Church as Nathaniel, Nate, Donovan stood stoically beside the mahogany casket. His face was a stone mask, betraying none of the turbulent emotions churning within him. Veronica's sudden death had sent shockwaves through their upper-class community of Silver Lakes, but for Nate, the shock had come days earlier. The church was filled with the soft sounds of weeping and whispered condolences. Nate's piercing blue eyes scanned the crowd, noting the fake tears, the curious glances, and the speculative whispers. In the third row sat his children, Olivia, 24, clutching a handkerchief as tears streamed down her face, and beside her, Maddox, 22, his jaw clenched tightly as he stared at the floor. Pastor William Bennett cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. If anyone would like to share a memory of Veronica, please come forward. Several people spoke, sharing polished anecdotes about Veronica's charitable work, her impeccable taste, her dazzling smile. Nate listened silently, hearing the half-truths and omissions, the sanitized version of his wife they chose to remember. Then, a tall figure rose from the fifth row. Nate's gaze locked onto him. Tristan Blackwell, renowned architect and Veronica's not-so-secret lover for the past 2 years. As Tristan approached the podium with measured steps, Nate felt his fingernails digging into his palms. Veronica was extraordinary, Tristan began, his voice steady and clear. She had a light inside her that few ever saw. His eyes fixed directly on Nate. He never loved her. Not truly. Not the way she deserved. The congregation gasped. Maddox half rose from his seat, fury etched on his features, but Olivia pulled him back down. Nate remained completely still, his expression unreadable. Pastor Bennett stepped forward awkwardly. Perhaps this isn't the appropriate. It's fine. Nate interrupted, his voice deadly calm. As Tristan returned to his seat, shooting challenging glances at Nate, the funeral proceeded. After the final prayer, Leonard Frost, Veronica's attorney, approached Nate with a small, ornate box. She left this specifically for Mr. Blackwell, Leonard explained quietly, with instructions it be given to him during the funeral. Nate nodded, taking the box from Leonard and walking directly to Tristan. The mourners watched in tense silence as he placed the box in Tristan's hands. "She left this just for you," Nate said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Tristan's triumphant smile faltered as he opened the box. His face contorted in horror, the blood draining from his features. The piercing scream that erupted from his throat echoed through the church as he dropped the box, its contents spilling onto the church floor. Photographs, documents, and a single USB drive. As pandemonium erupted, Detective Malcolm Reynolds, who'd been sitting quietly in the back row, pushed forward through the crowd. Nate walked out of the church into the rain, leaving chaos behind him. 3 days earlier, Nate had returned early from a business trip to find Veronica in their bed with Tristan. The confrontation had been explosive. Later that night, Veronica had stormed out, driving too fast on rain-slicked roads. The call came at 2:17 a.m. A crash, instantaneous death. That same night, Nate had made a decision. The path forward was clear. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about years of manipulation, lies, and betrayal that went far deeper than anyone suspected. Nate pulled out his phone as he stepped into his car, texting a simple message to an unlisted number. "It's done. Begin Phase 2. Chapter 2. Uncovering Deception. Nate sat in his home office, surrounded by darkness except for the glow of his computer screen. The house was empty. Olivia had returned to her apartment in the city, and Maddox had chosen to stay with friends. It had been 2 days since the funeral, and Nate had barely slept. On his screen were financial records, text messages, and emails, the digital breadcrumbs of Veronica's double life. For years, he'd suspected something was wrong, but he'd ignored the signs, choosing to believe in their perfect life, their perfect family. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "It's open," he called. Sam Winters entered, carrying a file folder and a bag of takeout. Sam had been Nate's friend since college, one of the few people he trusted implicitly. They dated briefly before Nate met Veronica, but had settled into a solid friendship that had endured for decades. "You look like hell," she said, placing the food on his desk. "Thanks for your honesty," Nate replied with a bitter smile. "What did you find?" Sam opened the folder, spreading its contents across the desk. "It's worse than you thought. Tristan and Veronica weren't just having an affair. They were planning something big." The documents revealed a complex scheme. Veronica had been systematically transferring family assets into shell companies controlled jointly by her and Tristan. Not just money, properties, investments, even intellectual property from Nate's technology firm. "They were going to leave me with nothing," Nate said quietly. "That's not all." Sam hesitated. "There's something about the kids." Nate's head snapped up. "What about them?" "Veronica had been turning them against you. Look at these messages." Sam pulled up a series of texts between Veronica and their children. Nate read them with growing horror. Subtle manipulations, carefully crafted lies, painting Nate as cold, unloving, even abusive. "Maddox seems to have bought it completely," Sam said gently. Olivia was more resistant, but Nate pushed away from the desk, walking to the window. Outside, the garden Veronica had meticulously designed was being pelted by another rainstorm. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the grounds. "Did I ever really know her?" he whispered. "There's more," Sam said. "The box at the funeral. What was in it?" "Evidence," Nate replied. "Everything I could find about Tristan's business dealings. Falsified architectural plans, buildings that didn't meet code, bribes to city officials. Enough to destroy him professionally and possibly send him to prison." "You've been planning this," Sam said, realization dawning on her face. "Since the night of the accident. I couldn't save my marriage, but I could make sure they didn't win." Nate turned back to face her. "The question is, how deep does this go? Who else was involved?" Later that night, as Sam slept in the guest room, Nate received a text from an unknown number. "Meeting confirmed. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., the usual place." The next day, Nate met with Douglas Walsh, Veronica's father, at an isolated fishing cabin by Lake Mercer. The elderly man looked haggard, age beyond his years. "I never wanted it to come to this," Douglas said, pouring himself a generous whiskey. "She was my daughter, but what she did, it was unforgivable." "You knew?" Nate asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Not everything. Not at first." Douglas took a deep drink. "I confronted her 3 months ago. She laughed in my face, told me it was all for the family legacy, that you were just a stepping stone." "What family legacy?" Nate pressed. Douglas looked up, his eyes hollow. "The Walsh fortune wasn't built on manufacturing, as everyone believes. My father, Veronica's grandfather, had connections. Dangerous ones." As Douglas spoke, the pieces began to fit together. The Walsh family's wealth had been built on decades of criminal enterprise, laundered through legitimate businesses. Veronica had been raised to continue the tradition, to expand the empire. "She chose Tristan because of his connections to city planning," Douglas explained. "Perfect for money laundering through real estate development. She chose you because of your technology firm, ideal for moving money internationally." Nate felt the last remnants of his old life crumbling around him. "What about my children?" he asked. "Are they part of this?" Douglas couldn't meet his eyes. "Maddox has been taking an active role the past year. Olivia refused to get involved. That's why Veronica was trying so hard to turn her." Nate stood abruptly. "I need proof. All of it." "It's all here," Douglas said, sliding a heavy envelope across the table. "What are you going to do?" "Why should I have done years ago?" Nate replied, his voice carrying a finality that made Douglas shiver. "I'm going to burn it all down." Chapter 3. The plan takes shape. Nate stood in the empty warehouse, the cavernous space echoing with his footsteps. This abandoned building on the outskirts of town had once been the site of his first business venture, a failure that had nearly bankrupted him before he met Veronica. Now, it would serve a new purpose. Detective Malcolm Reynolds circled slowly around the central space, his experienced eyes taking in every detail. "You're playing a dangerous game, Donovan," he said finally. "It's not a game," Nate replied. "It's justice." Malcolm and Nate had history. 15 years ago, Malcolm had saved Nate's life during a mugging gone wrong. They weren't friends, exactly, but they shared a certain understanding of the world. "The evidence you've gathered," Malcolm said, "it's substantial, but not enough for an official investigation, especially with the Walsh family's connections. They've got half the department in their pocket." "I don't need an official investigation," Nate said. "I need a trap." Over the next hour, Nate laid out his plan. Using the information from Douglas and his own investigation, he would orchestrate a scenario that would force the entire operation into the open. The warehouse would become the stage for a massive sting operation, unofficial, dangerous, and completely outside the law. "This could cost you everything," Malcolm warned. "Your reputation, your freedom, even your life." "They've already taken everything that matters," Nate responded coldly. Later that evening, Nate sat across from Olivia at an upscale restaurant downtown. His daughter looked tired, her normally vibrant features dulled by grief. "I didn't think you'd come," Nate said quietly. "I almost didn't," Olivia admitted. "Maddox told me not to." "You and your brother seem distant lately." Olivia pushed her food around her plate. "We've disagreed about things. Family things." "About me?" Nate asked directly. She looked up, her eyes, so like his own, filled with confusion. "Mom said things. About how you treated her, about your business." Maddox believed her completely. "And you?" "I wasn't sure," she said honestly. "You were always so distant, Dad. So focused on work." It made her stories believable. Nate reached across the table, taking her hand. It was the first real, physical contact they'd had in years. "Olivia, I need to show you something. But once I do, there's no going back. You'll have to make a choice." He slid a tablet across the table. On it was a video, security footage from their home showing Veronica in a heated argument with Maddox. The audio was clear. "Your father suspects nothing," Veronica was saying. "Once the merger goes through next month, we'll have control of his patents. Tristan's connections will ensure the money moves smoothly." "What about Olivia?" Maddox asked. "Your sister has made her choice," Veronica replied coldly. "She's too much like him, too principled. We'll deal with her the same way, if necessary." Olivia's hand trembled as she pushed the tablet away. "This can't be real." "It is," Nate said gently. "Your mother was involved in something dangerous, something criminal, and she was using us all as pawns." Tears streamed down Olivia's face. "Maddox, he's in deep, isn't he?" Nate nodded grimly. "I believe so, but there's still time to save him. If you help me." "What do you need me to do?" "Something difficult," Nate answered. "I need you to pretend you've turned against me too. To join them, gain their trust, and help me bring them down from the inside." Olivia stared at him for a long moment. "This will destroy our family." "Our family was destroyed long ago," Nate said. "We just didn't see it. This is about justice now, and protecting innocent people from what they're planning." As they parted outside the restaurant, Olivia hugged him tightly. "Be careful, Dad. These people, they won't hesitate to kill you if they find out." "I'm counting on it," Nate replied with a grim smile. That night, Nate finalized his preparations. He contacted various allies, old business associates, friends who owed him favors, and others who had been hurt by the Walsh family's operations. Each would play a critical role in what was to come. Sam arrived late, carrying the final piece of the puzzle. Internal documents from Tristan's architectural firm showing deliberate design flaws meant to cut costs and maximize profits at the expense of safety. "This is worse than we thought," she said. "If these buildings fail, people could die." "Then we make sure they don't fail," Nate replied. "And we make sure everyone involved pays for what they've done." He spread a detailed timeline across his desk. Phase 1 had been the funeral, planting the seed of doubt, showing Tristan that Veronica had betrayed him as well. Phase 2 was gathering intelligence and building alliances. Now it was time for Phase 3, the execution. "What about your kids?" Sam asked softly. "Maddox is implicated in all of this." Nate's expression hardened. "If he's chosen his path, he'll face the consequences. I won't protect anyone who's part of this." Not even my own son. That's cold, Nate, even for you. This isn't about being cold, he replied. It's about justice. True justice doesn't play favorites. As dawn broke, Nate sent a text to Tristan. We need to talk. About Veronica. About everything. Meet me tomorrow. Alone. The response came almost immediately. Name the place. Nate smiled grimly. The trap was set. Chapter 4. Setting the stage. The Silver Lakes Country Club hummed with quiet conversation as Nate navigated through the annual charity gala. Despite his recent loss, his appearance was immaculate. Tailored black suit, confident stride, the perfect mask of a man in control. It had been 2 weeks since the funeral, and high society had already moved on to the next drama. Mr. Donovan called Valerie Hayes, Veronica's oldest friend. So glad you could make it. Her sympathy seemed genuine, though Nate now questioned everything and everyone. I wouldn't miss it, he replied smoothly. Veronica would have wanted the foundation to continue its work. The Donovan Family Foundation had been Veronica's pride and joy, ostensibly dedicated to inner-city education, though Nate now suspected it served other purposes as well. Tonight was about maintaining appearances while putting the next phase of his plan into motion. Across the room, Tristan Blackwell held court among a group of influential developers. Since the funeral incident, he claimed the contents of the mysterious box were nothing but a twisted joke, photographs doctored to implicate him in various misdeeds. His lawyers had worked overtime to suppress any rumors, and his connections had ensured no official investigation was launched. Nate made his way to the bar, positioning himself to observe the entire room. Moments later, Maddox entered, looking uncomfortable in his formal wear. Their eyes met briefly before Maddox looked away, making a beeline for Tristan's group. He's fully committed to them now, came a voice beside him. Olivia slipped onto the adjacent stool, stunning in a midnight blue gown. Did you make contact? Nate asked quietly. Yes. I told Maddox I've been thinking about Mom's warnings, that I was starting to see your true colors. He was skeptical at first, but he wants to believe it. She sipped her champagne. He's arranged a meeting tomorrow with some of Tristan's associates. Apparently, there's a big project coming up, something about redeveloping the old industrial district. Perfect, Nate murmured. Remember, record everything discreetly. Trust no one, not even Maddox. Dad, Olivia hesitated. What happens to Maddox when this is over? If he's involved in criminal activity, that's his choice, Nate said firmly. I can't protect him from the consequences of his own actions, even if it means prison. Even then, Nate's expression softened slightly. I hope it doesn't come to that. Maybe he's just misguided, manipulated by Veronica and Tristan. But if he's actively participating in their schemes, knowing people could get hurt, he let the implication hang between them. Olivia nodded sadly, then stood. I should mingle. Maddox is watching. As she walked away, Sam approached from the other side. Everything's in place at the warehouse. Malcolm's team has installed the surveillance equipment. We're ready whenever you are. Good. And the financial trap? Set, Sam confirmed. The fake investment opportunity looks legitimate enough to tempt them, but transferring those funds will trigger the alerts we planted. We'll have digital evidence of money laundering the moment they act. Nate raised his glass slightly. Now we just need Tristan to take the bait. Later that evening, as the gala wound down, Nate deliberately positioned himself near the exit. As expected, Tristan approached, his facade of confidence firmly in place. Donovan, he acknowledged coolly. Holding up well, I see. Life goes on, Nate replied. I understand congratulations are in order. The Riverside Complex contract is quite a coup. Tristan's eyes narrowed slightly. News travels fast. I have interest in that area myself, Nate said casually. In fact, I've recently acquired some property adjacent to the development site. Property that might be useful to your project. Is that so? Tristan's interest was clearly piqued despite his wariness. We should discuss it sometime. Business is business, after all, despite our personal differences. Tristan studied him for a long moment. You're taking her death rather well. Grief manifests in different ways, Nate said, allowing a hint of steel to enter his voice. For some, it's tears. For others, it's focusing on the future, on new opportunities. Tomorrow, my office, 10 a.m. Tristan turned to leave, then paused. Bring the property details. As Tristan walked away, Nate exchanged a subtle nod with Malcolm, who had been watching the exchange from across the room. The detective casually touched his ear, activating his concealed communication device, and murmured something to his team outside. Back at home, Nate reviewed the surveillance feeds, now streaming to his secure server. Tristan had gone directly from the gala to a late-night meeting with several known associates of the Walsh family criminal network. He took the bait, Nate told Sam as they watched the footage. Now let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes. The next morning, Nate arrived at Tristan's architectural firm precisely on time. The sleek, modern building downtown showcased Tristan's signature style. Impressive, but, as Nate now knew, built with compromised materials and falsified safety inspections. Tristan's office offered a panoramic view of the city. Beautiful, isn't it? Tristan gestured to the skyline. I've designed 17 of those buildings. 17 landmarks that will outlive us both. Unless they collapse first, Nate said quietly. Tristan's smile faltered. I don't know what you think you know. I know everything, Nate interrupted. Every shortcut, every bribe, every falsified inspection. Just as I know about you and Veronica, about the money laundering, about the whole operation. Tristan's face hardened. Then you should also know how dangerous it is to threaten me. Not a threat, Nate corrected. A business proposition. I want in. Surprise flickered across Tristan's features. You want what? I want in, Nate repeated. Veronica was right about one thing. There's more money in your operation than in legitimate business. Since she's gone, you need someone with my connections, my resources. Why would I trust you? Tristan asked incredulously. Nate slid a flash drive across the desk. Consider this a down payment. Financial algorithms my company developed for banking security. They can be repurposed to move money undetected. Tristan picked up the drive cautiously. And what do you want in return? A seat at the table. Access to the Walsh network. And Nate leaned forward. I want to know exactly how Veronica died. A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Tristan spoke. The accident wasn't planned, if that's what you're asking. But it wasn't entirely unexpected either. She'd become a liability. Nate's face betrayed nothing, though inside, his suspicions were confirmed. I thought as much. So do we have a deal? Tristan smiled slowly. Let's find out if you're really as ruthless as you're pretending to be. Tomorrow night, the Old Donovan warehouse. We have a shipment coming in. Be there, and we'll see if you have what it takes. As Nate left the building, he activated his phone. It's set, he said to Malcolm. Tomorrow night. Alert the team. Chapter 5. Divided Loyalties. The rain had returned, turning the city streets into reflecting pools of neon light. Nate sat in his car outside Maddox's downtown apartment, watching as his son emerged with a group of young men, junior associates in Tristan's growing criminal enterprise. They laughed as they climbed into an expensive SUV, oblivious to their father's presence nearby. Nate had raised his children with everything they could want. The best schools, lavish vacations, unlimited opportunities. Where had he gone wrong with Maddox? Had it been his long hours at the office? Veronica's poisonous influence? Or something inherent in the boy himself? A moral weakness? Susceptibility to greed? His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Meeting confirmed. Warehouse. 10 p.m. tomorrow. Big shipment of something they're not discussing openly. Another text followed quickly. Maddox suspects nothing, but he's deep in this, Dad. Deeper than we thought. He's been managing accounts, moving money. He knows exactly what they're doing. Nate closed his eyes momentarily, feeling the weight of what was to come. His own son had chosen the wrong side. Tomorrow night would determine whether Maddox was salvageable or lost to him forever. At a small cafe across town, Sam met with Leonard Frost, Veronica's attorney. The elderly lawyer looked nervous, glancing repeatedly at the door. I've brought what you asked for, he said, sliding a thick envelope across the table. But if they find out I've given you these documents, no one will know, Sam assured him. Your name stays completely out of this. The envelope contained Veronica's private legal arrangements, trusts, offshore accounts, and the final piece Nate needed. Proof that she had been systematically transferring family assets away from her husband and daughter, concentrating wealth and power around herself, Maddox, and Tristan. Back at Nate's home, the team gathered for final preparations. Malcolm brought 3 trusted officers who were not on the Walsh payroll. Sam contributed 2 former intelligence operatives she'd worked with in her previous career. And Olivia arrived last, looking exhausted but determined. Tomorrow's shipment, she reported, is more than just money or contraband. They're bringing in people. Some kind of human trafficking operation tied to their construction projects. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. That changes everything, Malcolm said grimly. We can't wait for a bigger operation. We need to move tomorrow night. Agreed, Nate said. But we stick to the plan. I go in first, gain their trust. Once I confirm the shipment, you move in. Olivia looked troubled. What about Maddox? He'll be there. Everyone at that warehouse is assumed hostile, Malcolm stated firmly. We'll try non-lethal methods first, but if anyone resists violently... I understand, Olivia said quietly. Later, alone in his study, Nate reviewed security footage from his home from the weeks before Veronica's death. He had installed the system secretly, suspecting her infidelity, but discovering something far worse. The video showed Veronica and Maddox in deep conversation. Dad's patents are the key, Maddox was saying. Once we control those, we can implement the full plan. Patience, Veronica cautioned. We need to be careful. Your father isn't stupid. He's blinded by his precious principles, Maddox scoffed. He'd never imagine his own family working against him. The conversation continued, revealing the depth of the betrayal. They weren't just planning to take Nate's money. They were planning to use his legitimate technology to enable a vast criminal operation, potentially harming countless people in the process. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Olivia entered, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. Couldn't sleep, she explained, handing him one. Too much thinking about tomorrow. They drank in silence for a moment before Olivia spoke again. I found something in Mom's things. Something she kept hidden. She produced a small journal. It's coded, but I managed to decipher parts of it. She was planning this for years, Dad. Since before I was born. Maddox and I, we were just parts of her plan. She married you for your potential, your innovations. She never loved you. Nate took the journal, flipping through pages of meticulous notes, cold, calculating entries about his business, his patents, his potential usefulness to the Walsh family business. Did you read the part about you and Maddox? He asked quietly. Olivia nodded, tears forming. She wanted him in the business from the beginning. Groomed him for it. But me, she called me a complication. Too independent. Too much like you. Nate placed an arm around his daughter's shoulders, a rare gesture of affection. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I could have protected you both. It's not your fault, Olivia said firmly. We all make our choices. Maddox made his. The next morning brought a surprise visitor, Douglas Walsh, looking even more haggard than before. He paced Nate's office, agitation evident in every movement. They know, he said without preamble. Tristan suspects something. The warehouse meeting, it's a trap. How did they find out? Nate demanded. I don't know. Maybe your daughter was too eager, asked too many questions. Maybe they've been watching you. All I know is they're planning something big tonight, and it isn't just a shipment. Nate studied the older man. Why are you telling me this? They're your family. Douglas laughed bitterly. Family? The Walsh family died with my wife 30 years ago. What's left is a criminal organization wearing our name. Veronica became exactly what my father wanted. Ruthless, amoral, willing to sacrifice anyone for power. But I never wanted that for her, or for your children. So what's happening tonight? A cleansing, they're calling it. Eliminating loose ends. You're the daughter, anyone who knows too much. Douglas handed Nate a thumb drive. Security details, communication protocols, emergency extraction plans. Everything you need to survive tonight. As Douglas turned to leave, Nate called after him. Why now? Why help me after all these years of silence? The old man paused at the door. Atonement comes too late for me, but perhaps not for your son. Save him if you can, Nate. Not from justice, but from becoming what Veronica became. With this new information, the plan had to change. Nate gathered his team for an emergency meeting, laying out the revised strategy. It's even more dangerous now, he concluded. Anyone who wants to walk away, now's the time. No one moved. Malcolm checked his weapon. We knew the risks going in, but we need to consider the possibility that Olivia's cover is blown. All eyes turned to her. She straightened her shoulders. If they suspected me, they would have acted already. I'm still going in. No, Nate said firmly. It's too dangerous. Dad, I'm the only one who can confirm the shipment. The only one Maddox might listen to. You need me in there. The argument continued until Sam interjected. She's right, Nate. Without someone on the inside, we're going blind. Finally, Nate relented. Fine, but you stay in constant communication. First sign of trouble, you get out. As night fell, they moved into position. The warehouse loomed dark and imposing against the stormy sky. Nate adjusted his concealed wire and nodded to Malcolm. Remember, the detective said, we're 10 minutes out once you give the signal. Make sure you're clear of the main floor when we come in. Nate checked his watch. It's time. Chapter 6, The Turning Point. The warehouse echoed with Nate's footsteps as he entered through the main doors. Industrial lighting cast harsh shadows across the concrete floor, illuminating stacked crates and idle machinery from his long-abandoned business venture. In the center of the vast space stood Tristan, flanked by 4 armed men. Maddox stood slightly apart, his young face set in practiced indifference. Donovan, Tristan called. Right on time. I'm punctual for profitable ventures, Nate replied, walking forward steadily. His eyes briefly met his son's, finding no recognition there, no warmth, just the cool assessment of a stranger. Before we begin, Tristan said a small security precaution. He gestured, and one of his men approached Nate with an electronic scanner. Nate raised his arms calmly as they checked him for wires or weapons. The scanner passed over his chest, where the sophisticated transmitter Sam had provided lay undetectable against his skin, technology from his own company, beyond the capabilities of standard detection equipment. Satisfied, Nate asked as the man stepped back. Tristan nodded. Can't be too careful these days, especially with new associates. Where's the shipment? Nate asked directly. Patience. It arrives in 30 minutes. In the meantime, let's discuss your role in our organization. As they talked, Nate was acutely aware of Maddox watching him, analyzing every word, every gesture. His son had been well trained by Veronica, suspicious, calculating, always looking for the angle. The algorithms on that drive, Tristan continued, they're impressive, but we need full access to your company's security infrastructure. That can be arranged, Nate said smoothly. But first, I want to see what I'm getting involved with. No more vague references to operations and opportunities. I want details. Tristan smiled coldly. Fair enough. Maddox, why don't you explain to your father what we're really doing here? Maddox stepped forward, and for the first time, Nate saw a flicker of the boy he'd raised, eager to impress, to prove himself worthy. It was a painful reminder of how thoroughly Veronica had twisted their son's natural desire for approval. It's simple, Dad, Maddox said, the familiar address sounding strange in this context. Construction, real estate, technology, they're all just fronts. The real business is influence, control, power. As Maddox detailed the operation, Nate listened with growing horror. What had begun decades ago as simple money laundering had evolved into something far more insidious. A network that controlled politicians, judges, police officials, and business leaders through a combination of bribery, blackmail, and violence. Tonight's shipment, Maddox explained with disturbing pride, is the next phase. Workers brought in from overseas. Off the books, completely dependent on us. With them, we can accelerate construction on the Riverside project while cutting costs by 60%. Human trafficking, Nate said flatly. Maddox flinched slightly at the term. They're being given opportunities they wouldn't have otherwise. As slaves, Nate countered. As assets, Tristan interjected smoothly. Everything and everyone has a value in our business model, Donovan. The question is, what's yours? Before Nate could respond, the side door opened and Olivia entered. She looked nervous but determined, playing her role perfectly. Sorry I'm late, she said. Security was tighter than expected. Tristan's expression shifted subtly. Miss Donovan, we weren't expecting you until later. Maddox texted me to come early, she replied, looking to her brother. Maddox's face registered confusion. No, I didn't. The atmosphere in the warehouse instantly changed. Guards shifted positions, hands moving to weapons. Tristan's smile became predatory. It seems we have a problem, he said softly. Nate moved slightly, positioning himself between Tristan and Olivia. What's going on here, Blackwell? A test, Tristan replied. One that your daughter just failed. No one texted her. We've been watching her, monitoring her communications. She's been working with you all along. Maddox stared at his sister in disbelief. Olivia, is this true? Before she could answer, Tristan continued. The question now, Donovan, is whether you're equally duplicitous. Though I suspect I already know the answer. One of the guards produced a device and approached Nate again. This time, the scanner was different, more sophisticated. It beeped as it passed over Nate's chest. Well, Tristan said, it seems father and daughter share more than just looks. They're both traitors. No one's a traitor here, Nate said calmly, even as the guards surrounded them. Just people making choices about what side they're on. Tristan turned to Maddox. Your family has betrayed our organization. You know what needs to happen now. To Nate's horror, Tristan handed Maddox a gun. Prove your loyalty, boy. Start with your sister. Maddox took the weapon, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. He raised it slowly, pointing it at Olivia. Maddox, don't, she pleaded. This isn't you. Mom manipulated you, used you, just like she used all of us. Shut up, Maddox hissed, but his hand trembled slightly. Think about what you're doing, Nate said quietly. Once you cross this line, there's no coming back. Maddox's eyes darted between his father and sister, then to Tristan, who watched with cold expectation. I can't go back anyway, Maddox said, his voice breaking slightly. I'm already in too deep. There's always a choice, Nate insisted. Always a way back. For a long moment, the warehouse was silent except for the rain drumming on the metal roof. Then, with a sudden movement, Maddox lowered the gun. I won't kill my sister, he said firmly. Tristan's expression darkened. Disappointing, but not unexpected. The Walsh blood in you is weak. He gestured to his men. Take care of all three of them. Make it look like a family dispute gone wrong. As the guards moved in, Nate pressed the emergency signal on his transmitter. The response was immediate. The warehouse doors burst open, and Malcolm's team stormed in, weapons drawn. Police! Nobody moved. Chaos erupted. Tristan's men opened fire, forcing Malcolm's team to take cover. Nate grabbed Olivia, pulling her behind a stack of crates as bullets whizzed past. Maddox stood frozen in the center of the firefight, still holding the gun, caught between worlds. Maddox! Nate shouted. Get down! The young man finally reacted, diving behind machinery as bullets splintered the wood around him. Tristan had already disappeared through a back exit, his survival instincts kicking in at the first sign of trouble. The gunfight was brief but intense. Malcolm's team, professional and disciplined, quickly gained the upper hand. Within minutes, most of Tristan's men were either down or surrendering. Nate moved cautiously from his cover, searching for Maddox. He found his son huddled behind an old press machine, shaking with adrenaline and fear. Are you hurt? Nate asked, kneeling beside him. Maddox shook his head, unable to meet his father's eyes. I didn't know, he whispered. About the trafficking. About hurting people. Mom said it was just business, just moving money around. But you knew it wasn't legal, Nate said, his voice firm but not unkind. You knew what you were involved in wasn't right. I wanted to be important, Maddox admitted, tears forming. To be respected like she was. Like you were. Nate sighed heavily. Respect earned through fear isn't respect at all, son. Malcolm approached, his expression grave. Blackwell got away, but we've got his men. And the shipment's been intercepted. 30 people, mostly from Southeast Asia. They're safe. And Maddox? Nate asked quietly. Malcolm looked at the young man huddled on the ground. He's looking at serious charges. Money laundering, conspiracy, racketeering. But if he cooperates, tells us everything he knows about the organization. I will, Maddox said suddenly, looking up. I'll tell you everything. About Mom, about Tristan, about all of it. As Malcolm led Maddox away, Olivia joined her father, watching her brother being placed in a police car. Will he be okay? She asked softly. I don't know, Nate replied honestly. He made his choices. Now he has to live with the consequences. What about Tristan? He's still out there. Nate's expression hardened. Not for long. This was just the first phase. Now we hunt him down and finish this, once and for all. As they walked away from the warehouse, Sam arrived, bringing news that would change everything. Nate, she said urgently, we found something in the intercepted communications. About Veronica's death. It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't Tristan who arranged it. Then who? Nate demanded. Sam hesitated, glancing at Olivia. It was Douglas. Her own father ordered the hit. The revelation struck Nate like a physical blow. Why would he kill his own daughter? Because she was planning to cut him out completely, Sam explained. Take over the entire operation. He came to you not out of remorse, but to use you against Tristan to eliminate his competition. Nate's face set in a hard mask of determination. Then we have two targets now, Tristan and Douglas. No one manipulates me or threatens my family without consequences. As they drove away, the burning warehouse illuminated the night sky behind them, a fitting symbol of the old life going up in flames, making way for what was to come. Chapter 7. The Trap Closes. 3 days after the warehouse raid, Nate sat in Malcolm's office, reviewing the evidence gathered against the Walsh criminal enterprise. The walls were covered with photographs, documents, and connection maps, a visual representation of decades of corruption and violence. Douglas has gone aground, Malcolm reported. His estate is abandoned, bank accounts emptied. He's running. And Tristan, still in the city, according to our informants. He's calling in favors, trying to rebuild what was lost in the raid. But he's vulnerable now, isolated. Nate studied the photographs of his former father-in-law and his wife's lover, two men who had destroyed his family for their own gain. His expression revealed nothing, but inside, the cold fury that had sustained him these past weeks burned hotter than ever. What about Maddox? He asked. Malcolm sighed. He's cooperating fully. The DA is willing to offer a deal, reduce charges in exchange for his testimony. But he's still looking at time, Nate. There's no way around that. Understand, Nate said quietly. He made his choices. Later that afternoon, Nate visited Maddox in the detention center. His son looked smaller somehow, diminished by the institutional setting and the weight of his crimes. Dad, Maddox began, his voice cracking. I'm so sorry. Nate sat across from him, separated by a table bolted to the floor. I know you are. Are you here to tell me everything will be okay? Maddox asked, a hint of his old defiance showing through. No, Nate replied honestly. I'm here to tell you that you'll face the consequences of your actions. That justice will be served. But I'm also here to tell you that you did one thing right. You refused to hurt your sister. That choice matters. Tears streamed down Maddox's face. I was so stupid, so blind. Yes, you were, Nate agreed. Your mother saw your weaknesses, your desire for approval, your ambition, and she exploited them. But you're not a child anymore, Maddox. You knew what you were doing was wrong. What happens now? Maddox asked quietly. You tell the truth. All of it. You help bring down the organization. And then you serve your time. Will you? Maddox hesitated. Will you visit me? Nate studied his son for a long moment. Yes, but our relationship will never be what it was. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. As Nate rose to leave, Maddox called after him. Dad, there's something you should know. About Grandpa Douglas. He has a backup plan. Always has. A final failsafe in case everything went wrong. What kind of failsafe? I don't know exactly. but it has to do with the old hunting lodge in the mountains. The one where you and Mom got engaged. He mentioned it once. Said if everything went to hell, that's where he'd make his last stand. This new information changed everything. Nate immediately contacted Malcolm, and by nightfall, they had a plan in place. The hunting lodge, remote and isolated in the Blue Ridge Mountains, would be difficult to approach undetected, but not impossible. We need to move quickly, Nate insisted, before Douglas has time to implement whatever he's planning. This is a police operation now, Malcolm reminded him. You're a civilian. You can't be part of the raid. I'm not sitting this out, Nate said firmly. This man destroyed my family, used my children, killed my wife. And if you get yourself killed seeking revenge, what happens to Olivia? To Maddox? They'll have lost both parents. The argument continued until Sam intervened. There might be another way, she suggested. A way for Nate to be involved without compromising the operation. Her plan was elegant in its simplicity. Douglas knew Nate, but had never met Malcolm or most of his team. Nate would approach the lodge alone, ostensibly seeking an alliance with his former father-in-law, while Malcolm's team positioned themselves in the surrounding forest. It's risky, Malcolm admitted, but it could work. Douglas might let his guard down if he thinks you're there to make a deal. The next morning, as dawn broke over the mountains, Nate drove the winding road to the hunting lodge. The autumn foliage created a canopy of red and gold above him, the beauty of the scene at odds with the darkness of his mission. The lodge came into view, a sprawling structure of timber and stone that had once held happy memories, now tainted by betrayal. Smoke curled from the chimney, confirming Douglas was indeed there. Nate parked in the open, making no attempt to conceal his arrival. As he approached the main entrance, the door opened, revealing Douglas Walsh, shotgun in hand. "I've been expecting you," the older man said, his voice weary but his eyes alert. "Though I thought you might bring more friends." "This is between us," Nate replied. "Family business." Douglas laughed bitterly. "Family. Such a malleable concept in our world, isn't it? Come in, then. Let's talk." Inside, the lodge was much as Nate remembered. Rustic luxury, trophy animals mounted on walls, a massive stone fireplace dominating the main room. But now there were monitors set up on the dining table, displaying security camera feeds from around the property. "You think I don't know your detective friend and his team are out there?" Douglas asked, pouring himself a whiskey. "I've been playing this game since before you were born, son." "Then you know it's over," Nate said. "The organization is coming apart. Tristan is isolated. Maddox is cooperating. The Riverside Project is finished." "Nothing is ever truly over," Douglas replied. "Empires fall and rise again. The Walsh legacy will survive this setback, as it has survived others." "Not this time," Nate countered. "This time, I'm making sure it ends. For good." Douglas studied him with newfound respect. "You know, you remind me of myself at your age. The same determination, the same cold fury. Veronica was a fool to underestimate you. She learned that too late," Nate said. "Just as you have." As they spoke, Nate was acutely aware of the concealed transmitter sending their conversation to Malcolm's team. He needed to keep Douglas talking to extract a confession. "Why did you kill her?" Nate asked directly. "Your own daughter." Douglas's expression hardened. "She forgot the most important rule. Family comes first. She was planning to cut me out completely, to take everything I'd built and leave me with nothing. So you arranged the accident." "An opportunity presented itself," Douglas said, swirling his whiskey. "She was angry after your confrontation, driving too fast. All it took was a well-timed call to distract her, and a minor adjustment to her brakes earlier that day. Simple, clean, and now..." Nate pressed. "What's your endgame here?" Douglas moved to the fireplace, pressing a hidden panel that revealed a wall safe. "Insurance. Decades of evidence, of secrets. Enough to bring down half the power brokers in this state if released." He removed a heavy flash drive from the safe. "My ticket to freedom." "Or mine," Nate said quietly. Douglas turned, suddenly alert to the shift in Nate's demeanor. "You think you can take it from me?" "An old man, perhaps, but still dangerous." "I don't need to take it," Nate replied. You've already given me what I needed, a confession. My friends outside heard every word. Fury contorted Douglas's features as he realized the trap. He lunged for his shotgun, but Nate was faster, tackling him to the ground. The flash drive skittered across the hardwood floor as they grappled. Despite his age, Douglas was surprisingly strong, fueled by desperation and rage. He landed a solid blow to Nate's ribs, momentarily stunning him. Taking advantage, Douglas scrambled for the weapon. Nate recovered quickly, throwing himself forward and grabbing Douglas's legs. They crashed into the coffee table, sending it splintering to the floor. As they fought, the doors burst open, and Malcolm's team swarmed in. Police! Freeze! Douglas, seeing his plans crumbling, made one last desperate move. He broke free from Nate and lunged for a hidden drawer in the desk, pulling out a pistol. "Drop it!" Malcolm shouted. But Douglas was beyond reason now. He raised the weapon, taking aim at Nate. The gunshot echoed through the lodge, but it was Douglas who fell, hit by one of Malcolm's officers. As medics rushed to attend to the wounded man, Nate retrieved the flash drive from where it had fallen. "Is he alive?" he asked Malcolm. "For now," the detective replied grimly. "But he's looking at a long list of charges, starting with murder." Nate handed over the flash drive. "This contains everything: names, dates, transactions." The entire Walsh operation laid bare. Later, as they drove back to the city, Malcolm asked the question that had been hanging between them. "What about Tristan? He's still out there." "Not for long," Nate said, his voice cold with determination. "He doesn't know it yet, but his trap is already set." Chapter 8, Revelations. The Silver Lakes Country Club was hosting its annual Architects Gala, a prestigious event celebrating the city's most influential designers and developers. Despite recent controversies, Tristan Blackwell had secured an invitation, his connections still strong enough to keep him socially relevant. He moved through the crowd with practiced charm, though careful observers might notice the strain around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. The collapse of the Walsh organization had left him exposed, vulnerable, but not defeated. Not yet. From a secluded table in the corner, Nate watched his quarry. Beside him sat Valerie Hayes, Veronica's oldest friend and, as Nate had recently discovered, a longtime confidant of Douglas Walsh. "He's nervous," Valerie observed, sipping champagne. "Looking for allies, for protection." And finding none, Nate replied with quiet satisfaction. The past week had seen a systematic dismantling of Tristan's support network. Anonymous tips had led to investigations of his key business partners. Financial irregularities had been discovered in his firm's accounts. Building inspectors had suddenly developed keen interest in his completed projects. "Are you sure this will work?" Valerie asked. "He's desperate, but not stupid. Desperation makes even the smartest people careless," Nate said. "And our friend has always had one critical weakness: his ego." Their plan was elegant in its simplicity. Through Valerie, they had arranged for Tristan to receive information about a secret meeting of potential investors, wealthy foreigners looking for discreet real estate opportunities, unburdened by ethical concerns. The perfect lifeline for a man whose legitimate business was crumbling around him. As expected, Tristan excused himself from the gala precisely at 9, heading for the meeting supposedly arranged in one of the club's private dining rooms. Nate gave him a 3-minute head start before following. The hallway leading to the private rooms was deserted, the soft carpeting muffling Nate's footsteps. He reached the door marked Maple Room and paused, listening. From inside came the sound of Tristan's voice, tense with confusion. "Hello? Is anyone here?" Nate entered silently. Tristan stood alone in the center of the room, which was empty except for a projection screen and a single chair. "Looking for someone?" Nate asked, closing the door behind him. Tristan spun around, his expression quickly shifting from surprise to contempt. "Donovan, I should have known this was your doing." "Sit down, Tristan," Nate said calmly, gesturing to the chair. "We have things to discuss." "I have nothing to say to you," Tristan snarled, moving toward the door. "I think I want to hear what I have to say," Nate replied, pressing a remote control. the screen illuminated with a familiar image, the box from Veronica's funeral, especially since it concerns this. Tristan hesitated, then slowly took the seat. What game are you playing now? No game. Just finishing what Veronica started. Nate remained standing, controlling the physical and psychological space. She betrayed you, you know, long before she died. You're lying, Tristan said, but doubt flickered in his eyes. The contents of that box, the evidence against you, wasn't my doing. It was hers. She compiled it over months, insurance against the day you might become inconvenient. Nate clicked the remote again, and the screen showed emails between Veronica and unknown contacts, discussing Tristan's eventual removal from their operation. She was planning to replace you with someone younger, more controllable, someone who wouldn't demand equal partnership. Tristan's face paled as he recognized the authenticity of the messages. Why would she do this? We were building something together. Veronica never built anything with anyone, Nate said coldly. She used people, then discarded them when they no longer serve her purpose. Her father, her husband, her lover, even her own children. The revelation seemed to physically deflate Tristan. For a moment, Nate almost pitied him. Another victim of Veronica's manipulation, albeit a willing one. What do you want from me? Tristan asked finally. A confession, Nate replied simply. Everything you know about the Walsh operation. Names, dates, projects, clients. All of it. Tristan laughed bitterly. And why would I do that? To spend the rest of my life in prison? Because your alternatives are worse, Nate said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. Douglas is in custody, but his network isn't completely dismantled. How long do you think you'll last once word gets out that you're the loose end? The liability that could bring everything down. Fear flickered across Tristan's face as the reality of his situation sank in. You can't protect me from them. No, Nate agreed, but Malcolm Reynolds can. Witness protection, a new identity, a chance to start over. And if I refuse? Nate shrugged. Then I walk away, and you take your chances with what remains of the Walsh Empire. I hear they're particularly creative with traitors. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of decisions and consequences. Finally, Tristan nodded, defeat evident in every line of his body. What do you need to know? For the next hour, Tristan detailed the entire operation, the money laundering schemes, the compromised officials, the falsified building inspections. Names of accomplices spilled from him like a confession, each revelation adding another piece to the puzzle Nate had been assembling since Veronica's death. Malcolm, listening from the adjacent room, recorded everything. By the time Tristan finished, they had enough evidence to dismantle what remained of the criminal enterprise. There's one more thing, Nate said as Tristan's voice trailed off. The night Veronica died, you told me it wasn't planned, but wasn't unexpected either. What did you mean? Tristan looked away, genuine grief momentarily visible on his face. I love her, you know. Despite everything, I really did. But that night, after your confrontation, she was different. Cold. Calculating. She told me that if you became problematic, there were contingencies in place. Accidents that could be arranged. She was planning to kill me, Nate said flatly. Not immediately, only if necessary. But the way she spoke about it, so casually about the father of her children, it frightened me. I realized then that if I ever crossed her, she'd dispose of me just as easily. So when she died in the crash, I wasn't surprised, Tristan admitted. In our world, people who live by manipulation and threats often meet violent ends. I assumed someone she threatened had acted first. Her father, Nate confirmed. Douglas arranged the accident when he discovered she was planning to cut him out. Tristan's bitter laugh held no humor. The Walsh family tradition continues. Betrayal and counter-betrayal, generation after generation. As Malcolm's team took Tristan into protective custody, Nate remained in the empty room, contemplating the tangled web of deception that had defined his marriage. Everything he had believed about Veronica, about their life together, about himself, had been built on lies. Later that night, Nate returned to the house he had shared with Veronica, for 25 years. The place felt hollow now, stripped of meaning and memory. In the morning, he would contact a realtor. It was time to let go of this final remnant of his old life. In the master bedroom, he opened Veronica's closet one last time. Her clothes still hung in perfect order, her scent lingering faintly in the fabric. Behind a row of designer dresses, he found what he was looking for, a hidden wall safe that not even Olivia knew about. The combination came to him easily, the date they had met, a day he once considered the luckiest of his life. Inside was a single document, their original prenuptial agreement. But as Nate examined it closely, he realized it wasn't the same document he had signed. This version contained clauses and conditions he had never agreed to, his signature expertly forged. One last deception, he murmured, placing the document in his briefcase. Evidence of yet another crime, the one that no longer mattered in the greater scheme. As he closed the safe for the final time, his phone rang. It was Malcolm. "It's done," the detective reported. "Tristan's confession has been formally recorded. Arrests are already underway. The DA says it's the biggest corruption case he's ever seen. And Douglas, out of surgery, he'll live to stand trial." "Good," Nate said. "Everyone answers for what they've done. Everyone. That includes Maddox," Malcolm reminded him gently. "The DA's offer stands, reduced charges for a cooperation, but he's still looking at 5 to 7 years. "I understand." Nate's voice was firm, resolved. He made his choices. Now he faces the consequences. After hanging up, Nate walked through the silent house one last time. In the living room, family photographs still lined the mantel, smiling faces frozen in moments of apparent happiness. He picked up one from their 20th anniversary celebration, Veronica radiant in a silver gown, his arm around her waist, both of them beaming for the camera. All eyes, every smile, every touch, every whispered endearment. Calculated performances in Veronica's long game. Nate placed the photograph face down and walked out without looking back. Chapter 9. Justice Served. 6 months later, Nate stood at the observation window of the courtroom, watching as Judge Eleanor Brantley delivered the final sentences in what the press had dubbed the Walsh Enterprise trials. The culmination of half a year of legal proceedings. Today's sentencing would close the book on one of the city's most shocking criminal cases. Douglas Walsh, patriarch of the fallen empire, sat in a wheelchair, age and injury having taken their toll. Beside him, his attorneys looked grim, aware that their considerable skills could not overcome the mountain of evidence against their client. "In my 30 years on the bench," Judge Brantley was saying, "I have rarely encountered corruption of such scope and duration. The damage your organization has caused to this community cannot be measured merely in dollars or damaged buildings, but in the erosion of public trust and the very fabric of our civic institutions." The sentence when it came was severe, 25 years without possibility of parole. Given Douglas's age and declining health, it amounted to a life sentence. As the bailiffs wheeled him away, Douglas's eyes met Nate's through the observation window. There was no remorse there, no admission of wrongdoing, only a cold acknowledgement of defeat from one combatant to another. Next came a series of lesser figures in the conspiracy, corrupt officials, compromised inspectors, money launderers. One by one, they received their sentences, years of their lives forfeit to their greed and moral flexibility. Tristan Blackwell was not among them. True to his word, Malcolm had arranged witness protection in exchange for his comprehensive testimony. Somewhere, under a new name and identity, Veronica's lover was beginning a diminished but free existence. Finally, the moment Nate had been both dreading and awaiting, Maddox's sentencing. His son entered the courtroom in prison attire, looking thinner but somehow more centered than he had 6 months earlier. Regular visits and honest conversations had begun the slow, painful process of rebuilding their relationship, though both knew it would never be the same. Judge Brantley acknowledged Maddox's cooperation, his relative youth, and his expressions of remorse. The final sentence, 5 years with possibility of parole after 3, was as merciful as could be expected given the severity of his crimes. As Maddox was led away, He turned toward the observation window, somehow knowing his father would be there. Their eyes met briefly, an entire conversation passing without words. Then he was gone, and Nate was left with the echo of the judge's gavel ringing in his ears. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, hungry for comments from the man whose testimony had brought down the Walsh Empire. Nate moved through them with practiced ease, offering only a terse "justice has been served" before climbing into the waiting car, where Olivia and Sam waited. "It's really over," Olivia said as they pulled away from the courthouse. "The legal part is," Nate agreed. "The rest takes longer." 3 weeks later, Nate stood on the balcony of his new penthouse apartment, overlooking a city slowly healing from the wounds inflicted by the Walsh organization. Buildings with structural compromises were being reinforced. Corrupt officials had been replaced. The Riverside Project had been completely redesigned, with emphasis on safety and ethical labor practices. Behind him, the apartment was filled with moving boxes, most still unopened. The personal belongings from his old life had been mostly donated or discarded. This space, with its clean lines and uncluttered surfaces, represented his fresh start. A knock at the door announced Sam's arrival. She entered carrying blueprints and a bottle of champagne. "The board approved your proposal," she announced. "Donovan Technologies is officially pivoting to focus on building safety and structural integrity monitoring systems." Nate nodded with satisfaction. "Good. We'll start implementing the pilot program in the most vulnerable buildings first." They had spent months developing sophisticated sensor systems that could detect structural weaknesses before catastrophic failures occurred, technology that could save countless lives in buildings compromised by the Walsh organization's corner-cutting. "And this came for you," Sam added, handing him an envelope bearing the state penitentiary's return address. Inside was a letter from Maddox, his weekly communication detailing his progress in the prison's education program and his voluntary work counseling other young inmates. As Nate read, a small smile touched his lips. His son was finding his way back, not to the person he had been. That was impossible, but to someone new, someone who understood the cost of poor choices and the value of integrity. Olivia arrived an hour later, bringing dinner and news of her own. She had been promoted to director of operations at her firm, the youngest person ever to hold the position. "Dad, there's something else," she said hesitantly as they ate. "I've been thinking about changing my last name." Nate looked up, surprised. "To what?" "Back to Donovan," she said. "I briefly changed to Walsh after everything, to distance myself. But I was wrong. I'm proud to be your daughter." The simple statement affected Nate more deeply than he expected. Through all the betrayal and pain, this one truth remained: the bond between him and his daughter, tested but unbroken. Later that evening, after Sam and Olivia had left, Nate returned to the balcony. The city lights spread before him like stars, each representing lives touched by his actions over the past months. Some for good, others for ill. Justice had been served, but at great personal cost. His phone buzzed with a text from Malcolm. "Thought you want to know? The last of the Walsh accounts has been frozen. It's really finished." Nate typed a simple response. "Thank you. For everything." As he turned to go inside, his gaze fell on a small box on the corner table, the only item he had kept from his old home. Inside was a photograph of Olivia and Maddox as children, their faces alight with innocence and joy. A reminder of what had been lost, what had been saved, and what might one day be rebuilt. The path ahead would not be easy. Maddox had years of his sentence still to serve. The damage done to their family could never be completely repaired. But for the first time since Veronica's death, Nate felt something like peace settling around him. He had uncovered the truth. He had protected the innocent. He had ensured that those responsible face consequences for their actions, including, painfully, his own son. Justice, cold and uncompromising, had been his guiding principle, and he had not faltered, even when it broke his heart. As he closed the balcony door behind him, Nate Donovan made a silent promise to himself. The past was finished. Tomorrow would be about building something new from the ashes of betrayal. Something honest, something real. A legacy worthy of the name his daughter had chosen to reclaim. The betrayed husband had become the architect of justice. And in that transformation, he had found not just revenge, but redemption. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.